In Brightburn, Elizabeth Banks and David Moss play the Bryars, a married couple who live in Brightburn, Kansas. And then, one day they're having trouble having kids, conceiving naturally. And then one day, a rocket crash lands in their area. And inside, they find a little baby boy from another planet, whom they take and raise as their own child. And they tell everybody they're adopted. The little boy they name is Brandon, and he grows up and he gets superpowers because he's an alien. And it's very, very similar to the Superman myth. Of course, Brandon goes evil, and he becomes basically like evil Superman / Superboy. And this movie is an obvious, dark twist on the famous Superman origin story that basically asks the question, what if Superman, when he crash lands on Earth and is raised in Kansas, what if he doesn't become a good guy but becomes an unstoppable psychopath? What happens? That's basically the premise of Brightburn, which you probably knew if you'd heard of this movie and seen the previews. It's basically an evil Superman story. Like if you could say DC has Elseworlds, right? And Marvel has What If. It's like a what if or Elseworld story. The hero is evil, and this hero in question is Superman. And, it's produced by James Gunn, and it is written by Brian Gunn and Mark Gunn, who I assume are related to him because they have the same last name. Directed by David Yarovesky. Oh, and the main character, Brandon, the evil Superboy, Superman character, is played by Jackson Dunn. And that's pretty much all the cast that's of note in the crew that's, of note for the movie. Those are all the names. So basically, how is Brightburn? In my opinion, Brightburn is a very good, dark tale. I mean, it's exactly the kind of movie that you expect from the previews. I was actually worried seeing it because I had heard online chatter that this movie was brutal, graphic, disturbing to see. James Gunn, he hasn't changed. He's still the same horrible person. But I watched it, and again, I'm not saying that I agree with all that stuff about James Gunn necessarily, but that's what I'd heard, and I was like, man, this movie is going to be painful to watch. And I watched it, and I was like, this is basically just a straight up, dark thriller / horror movie, almost a horror movie. And what I mean by that is, there's definitely some scary shots and dark lighting in the movie, but the main character, who is evil in the movie, he's never really treated or framed in the same way that, Jason Voorhees or, the alien in Aliens is. He's never, they don't treat him as, the style of the movie is not a horror movie, even though a lot of people get killed. It's more like a dark thriller. The movie was never trying to scare you. I mean, I was never like, oh my God, I'm so scared I'm going to jump out of the seat. But there was still bad stuff happening on the screen. It's like, let's say if you like to read fiction, there's a genre of fiction that's straight up horror. And then there's a genre of fiction where it's more like dark sci-fi or dark fantasy, where the same graphic stuff happens, but the way it's written, it's not so much to scare you exactly, but it's a very darkly toned story. And I would say that Brightburn is a dark sci-fi movie, but it walks that fine line. It's on that side. There's a subtle line between dark, fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. And I think this is on the dark sci-fi, side. I don't think it's like a scary movie. And I think it's very well done if you like that sort of thing. If you want to see a movie that's like a what if tale, what if Superman grew up to be a psychopath with no one to stop him? This is that movie. I will say that, like most horror movies, I hope this isn't a spoiler, but I will say that this is, even though I said this isn't a horror movie, it does have a pretty dark ending, similar to what horror movies often have. In horror movies, it usually doesn't end well for a lot of people, and I think Brightburn is that kind of movie. So that's all I'll say about, that sort of thing. I thought all the performances were good. I thought the guy, Jackson Dunn, he was good at playing, preteen psychopath. Elizabeth Moss does a good job playing his adopted mother who doesn't want to accept, or who has problems accepting that, her son, whom she's raised, has turned out to be a horrible person. David Denham plays his father, who's struggling too. All the performances are good. There are some notable deaths in this movie. As Brandon, there's no one really in the movie to stop him with his level of power. So, there are a lot of graphic, gruesome deaths. So if you don't like seeing that kind of stuff, you might have problems with this movie. But if you're going to go see a movie like Brightburn, then I'm thinking you're the kind of person who's okay with seeing that kind of stuff on screen. The only big problem I have from a storyline perspective is he goes evil. It's like he doesn't, they've, like the parents he has raised him for like 10 years or 12 years, and he seems to be normal to them and they don't notice anything wrong. And then all of a sudden he hits puberty and it's like he turns into a psychopath. And there's a reason in the movie they seem to say that might trigger that in him. But I do think it's weird how like a child seems to like have grown up without any problems and then all of a sudden turns evil. I think it's a metaphor about how puberty and becoming an adult changes people, but I don't really know if it's going to change you from being like an average decent kid into being someone who's running around killing folks, unless there was something wrong with you to begin with. Like, it's not like he just becomes a jerk. He becomes like a genocidal jerk. And that's huge, you know? Like, most like teenage boys, when they become teenagers, and girls too, like they may become more jerky, but they aren't running around, you know, committing like slaughter, are they? I mean, that's not exactly that common. Granted, we don't have superpowers, but even so, I don't know if like most people would be acting like him just because, you know, their hormones are changing necessarily. There's something else going on there. And the movie does actually make it kind of explain why there might be something else going on, but it's very mysterious about it. It never answers that question. Maybe they're leaving that for Brightburn too, but you know, I don't really know if this movie was made for a sequel. I think this is just supposed to be a one-off anyway. But as it is, the story we get is, if you like this kind of movie, you will enjoy Brightburn. I mean, there's nothing in this movie is exactly the kind of movie you're expecting it to be if you've heard of it and seen the previews. But if you do not want to see a movie about like a godlike being beating on, you know, killing people who have no chance of fighting back, if you don't like that kind of narrative, you aren't going to like this movie at all. So, you know, you be the judge. I think it's a good, dark sci-fi, you know, slight, almost horror movie. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff I like to see. I like to see a lot of different things. So I thought it was cool. But, you know, you be the judge. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please like it on YouTube and subscribe to the channel because I appreciate your viewership. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.